you start to write down? Diane?
I was looking at the very first quote that was on there about that the motivation can decrease if they feel you're trying to control them. So one of the examples I had when we were talking was one of the classes that I was really motivated by was one where it was in a project format, but the requirements were kind of loose in that it was up to us to come up with our product.
Right.
And so that's kind of really hitting, wow, there's a lot to that, to be able to be the one in control a little bit of what you're actually doing with what you're given.
Yeah. So what do you have to do as a professor to do that, though?
Well, I think for me is look at more options in terms of, I teach math courses, and usually it's just a set, this is the homework you need to practice, but I know, like in one of my classes, I have it set up where there's book pages, but there's also an option to work at it through the computer. So this is already getting me thinking, I should be able to present it in where they have options as to which is their best route, not that I have to require all of it.
Right.
But that I can say you can either go with the book, or you can do the computer, or you can do it this, come up with maybe more options for them to actually try the skills on their own and have them be in control of picking which one works best for them.
Fantastic. So it means letting some control as a professor
Which
too,
is very hard.
which we're very used to holding on to. Eric, what kind of things did you write and react to and think about and maybe relate to what motivated you?
Oh, you mean myself as a student?
Sure. I mean, this is all kind of a threaded discussion, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess the thing that I always liked in professors is when I talk about the kinds of questions the discipline can answer, and like I was saying earlier, what motivated me with the professor I went on to become a research assistant to. Pointing out, the unanswered questions.
Right.
Those are the things that jumped out to me when I was reading this.
This idea of big questions and
big
meaningful
questions, things that you could make a contribution to.
Right. Good. Tom?
My turn in the barrel?
Yeah.
What Diane was saying, relating material to the discipline and the questions that what the discipline can help you achieve it. And I always emphasize logic and math in my background. That if you can learn the discipline of mathematics, the logic of mathematics, it helps you in almost every facet of your life.
Right.
Because whether you're a PhD in abstract mathematics or not, but you need to be able to add, subtract, and understand why you are doing this and not that.
Right.
Some of the relating fundamental inquiries to larger questions, well, that's the way I was trained. I worked in the physics department at the University of Pennsylvania for 5 years, particle physics, and then I worked for that computer company that used to be in Kingston. And they would give you something and you'd say, yeah, well, this really looks good, and then somebody would sit down with you and say, yes, but did you think about this, and how about that, and what if this? And so I learned to think that way, and so I try to use those kinds of techniques when I'm teaching.
Very good. Okay. Kim? Kim.
To go back to the first discussion area, what really grabbed me was the passion of the teacher for the subject. And I still have a visual memory of my 7th grade English teacher running in and tossing off his blazer and jumping up on the desk and beginning to recite poetry, and I was hooked immediately. It was just great.
And that's decades ago.
It was,
right?
yes, some time ago.
Yeah.
And it was like he was giving us a gift. He was giving us a gift of his passion for language and for the power of language to enable me to express myself.
Right.
And that was what I got from that course and has stayed with me ever since.
What's the big question that you think he was hitting on, or what's this? Because this is this theme, right? Is that they keep tying things back to your experience and things that are important to you.
It was real life.
Uh-huh.
You know, the poetry, you know, was certainly, there was a variety, but each poem that he exposed us to or brought to us engendered a discussion about real life and issues that we were facing as teenagers at that time, and so it was very connected to actuality as opposed to I hate to say this, but a sort of synthetic academic reality. That
You know,
can be
it's the same thing.
divorced
My
from real
memory
life.
was a 12th grade English seminar, and we were talking about Sophocles and Oedipus Rex, but we were talking about the challenging of authority, and when is it proper to do that, and what's going on in the school, and when do you challenge your teachers, and it was all stuff that related to who we are and what our lives are about. And I still remember that. It was my first introduction to ideas. So
I feel somewhat constrained as I'm teaching a technical writing course right now that, it's a fairly dry subject on the surface, but we are able to get into ethics discussions about, and it's, much of the textbook is it seems to be slanted toward a kind of study of corporate situations, but I am able to open up some ethical discussions if I find that that's what the students are responding to as much as learning how to write a technical document. That's a pretty mechanical procedure.
do you still do that Tinker Toy or that?
Yes, we did the Tinker Toy exercise early on, and they loved that.
Right.
It was wonderful.
Why do they love that? Because I have seen students do that, and they would come out over and ask me, put this thing together, and I would start doing it, following it, and then they'd say, oh my God, we didn't think, and they love that.
I think first of all, they love being able to use their hands to do something. Hands-on learning is always, it's okay. It's artistic. It's creating something.
I don't know
from a
if you
bunch
guys
of
know
sticks.
about this. It's an exercise in which they have to write the directions on how to assemble. It's not Tinker Toy, is it?
It is Tinker Toys
Tinker
still.
Toys.
There are wooden
In a
cells
certain
and boxing
way, right? So it says plug this in, and then you'd have to follow the directions. And I remember I would follow the directions, and they'd go, oh my God, we would never think that someone would think to put it in that side from our directions, and then they would rewrite it. And but I remember them being, they would be, I would go through the computer lab, and they would just be engaged and drag me in, and very excited about that.
I mean, they get to create something. They can build whatever they want, but then they have to write the instructions to tell everyone else how to build it.
So that's was your stuff in Monica's office?
There were some boxes. Yes, that was. I carried my Tinker Toys around for 3 or 4 weeks.
The thing that I got really plugged into was this thing of outstanding teachers generally avoid using grades to persuade students to study. I just noticed that in comments that I was making in my online course, if you want to do better on your grades, you need to do this, that, and the other. And so I'm totally falling into this trap of that's the reason, that's the motivator as opposed to...
It's the culture. I think it's the culture of students in general, right? And of the unmotivated students, I think it's, but when you all talked about your stories, it had nothing to do with, I was really motivated to do a grade. I mean, you guys talked about the challenge, but that was all the internal challenge. It wasn't, some grade from external. It was overcoming something in yourself.
Do we need to know this for the exam?
Yes, that's it.
There was a time, though, when I did worry about grades as a student. And I think every student goes through that. It's inevitable because it's the watermarks. Your parents want you to get good grades, so you're looking for their approval. But eventually, I got to the point where I had to learn it because I wanted to learn it, and the grade be damned.
And the stories that you told of the times when you were motivated, and that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about the unmotivated students. Didn't have much to do with grades. They had to do with something else.
Well, I
And
always tell
so-
my students that I don't give grades.
that
You
they-
earned the grade, I put the work in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So, when Hope and I were thinking about this hour, what we decided was that what we would try and do is to actually, as much as possible, model it, is to try and get you all motivated and engaged with this material. Were there times when you were engaged with the material, with this stuff? When did it happen? It didn't happen when we were talking mostly, right? Happened a lot when you were talking, when you were arguing, you were engaged. My experience has been if we create environments, and I have thought of my teaching more and more as my job is to create sort of exercises, what I call thinking exercises. And Richard Paul, who's an expert on critical thinking, said, design exercises in which they're actually thinking and acting. And this is because if they're just passively taking in information, they're not thinking. And if we want them to think, they should practice thinking. And he used the example of the soccer coaches. You don't see them putting their guys in the stands for 3 hours and talking about soccer, right? This is how you play soccer. He tells them a little bit, but then he puts them into exercises and drills. So we've tried to model that a little bit. And so just an hour, and we've exposed you to a few things. A little bit about what goes on in your classrooms with the unmotivated student. Times when it has been motivating for you, and what was that like in your environments. A little bit of the research, and hopefully you'll be interested enough to read the rest of it, and maybe even perhaps the book. It's a little tough to get through the whole thing, but there's some wonderful stuff in there. And then lastly, this idea of what we want to leave you with is, from just this hour and your experience here, as students yourself, right? In a sense, you were students here. What can you take? Let's brainstorm a little bit. What can you take back with you to your classrooms to meet the needs of the students who walk through your doors? So, I want you to write down 2 things that you might do